You are in debt right now. Maybe you know exactly how much. Maybe you have stopped counting because the number makes you sick. Maybe it is not one big debt, but 10 small ones. A mobile loan here, a family obligation there, a supplier you have been avoiding calling back for 3 months. Whatever the specific shape of your debt, here is the number that should concern you most. The average interest rate on mobile lending platforms across Nigeria, Ghana and Kenya is between 30 and 60% annually. Read that again. If you borrowed $500 on one of these platforms at 40% annual interest and made no payments for 1 year, you would owe $700. In 2 years, $980. In 3 years, $1,372. You did not spend $1,372. You spent $500. But the debt grew while you slept, while you worked, while you did everything right, simply because the structure of how you borrowed was designed to grow faster than your ability to pay it back. This is not bad luck. This is not a personal failure. This is a system specifically designed to keep you paying indefinitely. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to escape it permanently. Why debt feels impossible to escape. Before the plan itself, I need to explain something about why debt feels so psychologically overwhelming that most people never actually confront it directly. The human brain, when faced with a problem that feels too large to solve, does something predictable and entirely counterproductive. It avoids the problem entirely, rather than engaging with it in any form, because partial engagement with an apparently unsolvable problem produces anxiety without producing progress, which feels worse than simply not thinking about it at all. This is why most people with significant debt know roughly how much they owe, but have not looked at the exact number in months. It is not laziness. It is a rational psychological defense mechanism against the anxiety produced by confronting a problem that seems larger than any available solution. The specific problem with this avoidance is that debt, unlike almost every other problem in life, actively grows in the absence of attention. Every day you avoid looking at the exact number, that number is increasing. The interest compounds silently, invisibly, without requiring any action on your part, simply accumulating, because time is passing and the original terms of the debt are operating exactly as they were designed to operate. Dangote understood something about debt from the very beginning of his business career that most people never fully internalize. Debt is not a static condition. It is a dynamic process with a specific direction, and that direction, in the absence of deliberate intervention, is always toward more debt rather than less. This understanding is precisely why his approach to debt throughout his career has been characterized by absolute specificity rather than avoidance, knowing exactly what is owed to whom at what rate, with what timeline, not as a source of anxiety, but as the essential information required to make any progress at all. Stop for a moment. I want you to do something specific right now before we go any further. Open your phone. Go to your banking app, your mobile money account, whatever platform holds the clearest picture of your current financial obligations. Look at the actual number, not approximately, not roughly, the actual specific current number of what you owe across every source of debt you currently carry. Write it down if you need to, but know the number before we continue, because everything I am about to show you only works if you are working with the real number rather than a comfortable approximation of it. The 3 categories of African debt. Most debt advice treats all debt as identical, which is precisely why most debt advice fails. Not all debt is the same, and the specific strategy for addressing each category differs significantly. The first category is predatory short-term debt. This is the category that destroys more African financial progress than any other single form of debt, specifically because of its combination of high accessibility, high interest rates, and short repayment timelines that create a recurring cycle rather, than a path toward resolution. Mobile lending platforms, informal money lenders, and certain categories of merchant credit fall into this category. The specific characteristic that makes this debt predatory is not that it is inherently wrong to offer it. Markets with limited access to formal credit. These platforms serve a genuine need. It is that the structure of the debt, when used repeatedly and not repaid promptly, creates a compounding trap that is extraordinarily difficult to escape through normal income alone. If you currently carry debt in this category, it represents your highest priority for elimination, regardless of the absolute amount involved, because the interest rate structure means that every month this debt remains outstanding. The total obligation grows at a rate that will eventually exceed your capacity to address it through any realistic income scenario. The second category is relationship debt. This is the category most specific to African financial life: money owed to family members, friends, community members, or informal savings groups. This category of debt carries a unique characteristic that distinguishes it from every other form of debt. It carries social interest in addition to any financial interest. The cost of not repaying relationship debt is not merely financial. It is the ongoing erosion of specific relationships, the social pressure that affects every interaction with the person owed, and the quiet guilt that consumes mental and emotional energy continuously until the obligation is resolved. This psychological cost is real and significant, and it deserves to be included in any honest accounting of what relationship debt actually costs, even when no formal interest is being charged on the outstanding balance. The third category is productive debt. This is debt incurred specifically to fund income-generating activity. A loan that purchased inventory that generated trading profit, credit that funded equipment, that reduced costs or increased productive capacity, financing that enabled an expansion that grew revenue beyond the cost of the debt itself. Productive debt, when structured correctly and deployed into genuinely income-generating activity, is fundamentally different from the first two categories because it carries the potential to pay for itself through the returns it generates. This is the only category of debt that Dangote has consistently maintained throughout his career. Debt specifically structured to fund productive capacity that generates returns exceeding the cost of the debt itself. Understanding which category each specific debt you carry falls into is the essential first step of the plan I'm about to walk through, because the specific approach for addressing each category differs significantly. Here is something most people never calculate. If you are paying 2,000 Naira per month in interest on a mobile loan, which is modest by the standards of most platforms currently operating across African markets, that is 24,000 Naira per year. Not paying down debt, not buying anything, simply keeping a debt in existence. 24,000 Naira per year in pure interest on a modest mobile loan is the equivalent of the first 2 months of the savings discipline discussed in the previous videos in this series. Every month your highest interest debt remains outstanding. It is consuming savings capacity that could otherwise be building the financial foundation this series has been mapping out. Eliminating that debt is not just about escaping obligation. It is about recovering productive financial capacity that is currently being consumed by interest before it ever reaches your saving system. The 5-step debt elimination plan. Here is the specific plan, not general advice to spend less and pay more. A specific, sequenced approach that addresses each category of debt in the order that produces the fastest total elimination and the greatest recovery of productive financial capacity. Step 1. Complete inventory with exact numbers. This is the step most people avoid, and avoiding it is precisely what keeps the debt growing. Before any payment strategy can be designed, you need a complete, accurate picture of every current debt obligation, the exact balance, the exact interest rate or fee structure, the exact minimum payment required, and the exact creditor or person owed. This inventory should be written down in a single place, not stored, across multiple apps, multiple conversations, multiple partially remembered obligations, a single, complete list that represents the total honest picture of your current debt position. This step costs nothing and requires no money. It requires only the willingness to confront the actual number, rather than continuing to carry an approximate, slightly comfortable version of it in your head. Step 2. Immediate elimination of the smallest predatory debt. Once the complete inventory exists, identify the smallest balance in the predatory short-term debt category. Not the highest interest rate, the smallest balance. The reason for targeting the smallest balance first, rather than the highest interest rate, reflects a specific psychological reality about how motivation and momentum function in sustained debt elimination efforts. The fastest path to eliminating total interest paid is mathematically the highest rate debt first. But the fastest path to building the psychological momentum required to sustain a multi-month debt elimination effort is the fastest visible win, which is almost always the smallest balance. Eliminating even one debt completely. As in two as seeing one obligation disappear from the inventory entirely, produces a specific psychological effect that partial payments on a large balance never generate. It proves that the system works. It demonstrates that debts can actually be eliminated, not just serviced indefinitely, and it frees the minimum payment that was going toward that eliminated debt to be redirected toward the next obligation on the list. This redirection of freed minimum payments toward the next debt, what debt elimination specialists call the debt snowball, is precisely what produces the accelerating momentum that makes this plan work faster than simply making minimum payments across all debts simultaneously. Step 3. Address relationship debt with explicit communication. Unlike predatory short-term debt, relationship debt cannot be addressed through a purely financial strategy. It requires explicit, direct communication with the specific people owed, not avoidance, not partial acknowledgement, not the ongoing pretense that the obligation does not exist or will somehow resolve itself. Without direct engagement, the specific approach that works for relationship debt involves 3 elements. First, acknowledge the obligation explicitly and specifically, rather than relying on the other person to bring it up. Second, propose a specific repayment timeline, not a vague commitment to pay when possible, but a specific schedule with specific amounts and specific dates. Third, deliver on that specific schedule consistently, even when the individual payments are smaller than the person owed might prefer. This approach serves 2 functions simultaneously. It addresses the financial obligation through a realistic and sustainable repayment structure, and it interrupts the psychological and social cost of the ongoing, unresolved obligation by replacing vague, uncomfortable avoidance with a specific, communicated plan that both parties understand and can track against. Step 4. Restructure productive debt toward its purpose. If you carry debt in the productive category, debt originally incurred to fund income-generating activity, the specific question to ask about that debt is whether it is actually generating the income it was intended to generate. If a business loan was taken to fund inventory that is generating trading profit, and that profit exceeds the cost of the debt is performing its intended function, and the primary management task is ensuring the income it generates is being systematically directed toward repayment, rather than being absorbed into general spending. If a business loan was taken for a purpose that has not generated the expected income, whether because the business activity underperformed, because the funds were redirected toward non-productive purposes, or because circumstances changed in ways that prevented the expected return, then this debt needs to be reclassified honestly into the predatory category and addressed accordingly, rather than maintaining the fiction that it remains productive debt simply because it was originally intended to be. Step 5. The debt firewall. This final step is the one that determines whether the entire plan produces permanent escape from the debt cycle or simply a temporary period of lower debt that gradually rebuilds toward the previous position. The debt firewall is a specific, predetermined rule about what categories of debt you will and will not incur going forward, decided in advance and maintained consistently, rather than negotiated fresh each time a specific situation creates pressure toward a specific new debt. The specific rule that Dangote's approach suggests is this: new debt is only acceptable when three conditions are simultaneously met. The debt funds a specific identified income-generating activity. The projected return from that activity measurably exceeds the total cost of the debt, including all interest and fees, and the debt can be serviced from existing income without disrupting the savings and investment allocations established through the 5-account system discussed in earlier content on this channel. Any debt that does not meet all three conditions simultaneously belongs outside the firewall, which means finding another solution to whatever need that debt was intended to address, rather than incurring the debt and addressing its consequences afterward. I want to address something directly that I know some people watching this are thinking right now. This plan assumes I have extra money to put toward debt elimination. I barely cover my essential expenses as it is. This is a real and legitimate concern, and it deserves a direct answer rather than a generic encouragement to simply try harder. If your current income genuinely does not cover essential expenses plus any debt service, the debt elimination plan cannot begin with payments. It must begin with income, specifically with the second income framework discussed earlier in this series, identifying any realistic way to generate even a modest amount of additional income specifically designated for debt elimination before any other purpose. Even a small amount of additional income directed entirely and immediately toward the smallest predatory debt on your inventory begins the snowball process. The amount is less important than the direction. Every dollar going toward debt elimination, rather than new spending, is moving the inventory in the right direction rather than the wrong one. What debt-free actually means for your financial trajectory. I want to close with something specific about what eliminating your current debt obligations actually does to your financial position going forward, because understanding this makes the sacrifice required to execute this plan feel proportionate to what it produces. Every dollar currently being consumed by interest payments is a dollar that is not building the financial foundation this series has been mapping, not saving, not investing, not funding a second income stream, simply maintaining the existence of a debt that is growing regardless of what you do. Eliminating that interest payment permanently, not reducing it, eliminating it, recovers that dollar for productive financial purposes indefinitely. The month after the last predatory debt payment is made, every dollar that was previously going toward that debt's interest is available for the savings and investment system discussed in earlier content on this channel. This recovery of productive financial capacity, compounded across the months and years following complete debt elimination, represents a genuine acceleration in the trajectory toward financial security that no amount of income increase alone can replicate, as long as the interest payments consuming a portion of that income remain in place. Dangote's consistent discipline throughout his career regarding debt, using it specifically for productive purposes, eliminating non-productive debt as a priority, maintaining a clear firewall against debt that does not meet his specific criteria reflects exactly this understanding. The absence of non-productive debt obligations is not merely a conservative financial preference. It is the specific structural condition that allows every available dollar to move toward building rather than simply maintaining an existing obligation. Your debt is not permanent. It is a specific finite obligation with a specific calculable elimination date. If you know the exact numbers, apply the specific sequenced plan and maintain the firewall against new non-productive debt going forward. Calculate that date, write it down, and build toward it with the same discipline that has been building your financial foundation throughout this series. If this plan gives you something specific to act on this week, subscribe. New videos every 2 days on the mindset and systems behind Africa's greatest business empire. See you in the next one.